Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another webcast by Accurate. For today's discussion, we'll be focusing on a very relevant topic, AI governance and compliance. Especially with all these AI applications and their relevance today, it becomes super important for you to take a step back and check where you are with your governance for the data and AI solutions in there. Let's move on. For the session today, Kalyan and I would be your host. I'm Poonam. I am the VP for Migration and Modernization here at Accurate. And Kalyan, who joins me, is our Data and Governance SME and Architect. Here's the agenda for the session today. We'll do a quick introduction about Accurate. Then we'll do a deeper dive about governance, why it is relevant today, what are the standards that you should be looking for. And then we'll focus into the governance framework, right? How it is relevant for your data, what is the responsible AI concepts, and so on. So let's move on. Here's a quick introduction about Accurate. We have been around in the industry for almost 2 decades now. And during this journey, we have helped a lot of customers across the globe with their digital transformation journey. The way we do that is with our 3 core pillars. We help customers with solutions around AI and automation, data and analytics, and workplace modernization. The key differentiator that we bring to the market is our accelerators, with which we are able to reduce the time to market and help deliver tried and tested solutions to our customers. Next slide, please. Here's a quick look at some of our prestigious clientele across the world. AI governance demands urgent attention today. This is something very important. So for that, I'll hand it over to our expert on the call here. Kalyan, over to you.
All right, thank you, Poonam. All right, so let's step back. Let's try to understand why the governance is an important activity. With AI tools coming out and the changes coming so often, there are some regulatory or rather regulations that have been set up. The first one is the NIST AI RMF. Many of us are already aware of this. ISO had come up with ISO 40001 certification back in December 23. And the first act, a law sort of thing, had actually come up in 2024 August with the EU AI Act coming in. This marked an important stage where even the government is now focused on how AI will be used for the population across the world. Now, until this point, these have all been guidelines from various institutions and organizations. But what we've seen in the past few months and a year is that there have been more enforceable restrictions that have been set up, some mandates that have been given. So that started off with the EU AI Act Article 5, especially where there is some prohibition practices that have been set up with respect to AI. Like, for example, you cannot do some scoring systems when it comes to people, right? And then there have been more rules that have been added at a later point in time. Now, what is more important here is that the system has moved from just guidelines to enforceable acts. So this is an important note. Now, what is the cost of inaction? The cost of inaction is that there are huge fines from the regulatory bodies. And there are a lot of organizations which are now started making this as part of their legislative guidelines as well. So it's important that that we don't wait until an audit comes or until a request is made, but all the systems that are built with relevant governance and relevant rules in place. And so, as I said, the shift has moved from this guidelines and documentation to evidence-based proof. Evidence-based would mean that these have to be shown through a system. It's not just someone just talking about it, right? So, especially when it's coming to AI, because of the whole undeterministic nature of AI, the whole tracing and then the decision making has to be shown to the regulatory bodies. And so the answer definitely can't be that, okay, the AI has taken a decision. It is still some person who's accountable to this. And hence the evidence plays a big role. So now we'll talk about what sort of evidence is usually required. Before that, let's look at the various standards. So I've already mentioned the standard, but we'll just quickly look at it. So for 2001, any organization which is already certified with say 27001, for 2001 certification will help. And this is one certification which many organizations are looking towards. Uh, and This is AIMS, so AI management systems is what is being done with 40001. And the RMF is NICIA RMF is more of a framework of what and the guidelines of how risk management should be done. What is the risk management framework would look like? AI Act is a more detailed regulatory body based, legally binding guidelines. And many organizations, even those who are not in Europe, are looking at EU AI Act as a gold standard. And it's pretty comprehensive from that standpoint. OECD and then IEEE are more guidelines and principles, and these can be followed. But what we are seeing is there is an overlap, and we look at what that overlap among all of these are. With 40001, the main goal is, again, if you see, there is a risk management aspect, there is governance aspect, there's accountability as well. And if you see, again, if you are already 27001, you see that there's quite a lot of overlap. Where with 27001, you have the information security, whereas with 40001, it is AI management systems. ARMF is primarily a risk management framework, and with core functions being, for example, govern is one of the core function, and where you're looking at, does the organization have relevant roles and responsibilities defined? Is your RACI matrix defined in the organization or not? And are there approval policies in place so that even before a model, say, goes into production, is it approved by, say, a risk officer, AI risk officer, or a committee, right? Such risk constraints are checked. And when it comes to mapping, you're looking at, say, for example, uh, will the model work? Let's say if your current underlying organization's data has an underrepresentation of, say, some of the demographic or some of the groups, minority groups, then the model may not work in the right way, right? So is that risk already being mapped or not? And then whether all these risks are actually being measured or not, right? So what then it could be that, let's say after the model is deployed, is there any audit being done, a fairness audit, for example, being done on this model, so that there are no anomalies that are present, and even if there is an anomaly that is present, that it is put in the risk register. And then finally, if there is a risk that happens, first of all, what is the risk assessment? And if a risk does occur, what does the contingency plans look like? Right. So all these are captured, are provided as a framework with AIRMF. And interestingly, if this section is covered, this ARMF is covered, it covers various sections of for 2001. For example, clause 5, 6, 9, and 10 get covered. Um, the ISO 42001, and even within the EU Act, the Article 9, where majority of the risk and testing is present, gets covered. So it will be important to follow the framework provided by ARMF. Covering the ISO 42001, then we see that many of the EU Act are already getting covered. Similarly, with transparency and documentation and data governance as well. And we look at all of these things and how, for example, now one way to do it is to obviously do a very manual way of tracking each of them. But what we recommend is to use some sort of a tool. This could be a tool that you already have in-house, or you might want to subscribe to one. And so let's look at how the tooling would work to ensure that, when you are going into the audit, let's say you want to get ISO 40001 certified, then what are the things that you have to have beforehand, rather than going into an audit and having a very lengthy audit process. Right? So what we suggest is to have some sort of a framework, and this one governance, AI governance framework that we suggest with 5 very important things. One is on the data trust side, and with the major activity being the data governance. Then the algorithms and architecture that has to be chosen for all your AI models and other things. We talk about responsible AI, and then performance metrics, and then the infrastructure. These are from some of the key things that have to be covered. And we look at the data governance, responsibility, and metrics. For data governance, we suggest you have some sort of framework in place. And these are like some of the core activities that would be done. So one is within the organization itself, you need to have some sort of data principles and strategy that is already established. And again, these can tie back to your existing organization principles. These are not specifically data principles. So if you have them already, this is good, this would be a good way to move forward. And you also want to have organization roles defined upfront. What we need to understand as a data governance or any governance activity is a top-down pay system, right? And it is also a change management system. So you want your top management buy-in to be there for any governance related implementation. So defining our organization roles will actually help with mentioning who is the responsible person, who is accountable, and for what. And also in an enterprise, there are a lot of hundreds of data sources. So you want to identify which are the important ones, which one is, for example, a CRM system, which one is your master data management system. So identifying those authoritative data sources will be important. Next is to have a data architecture. Again, assuming that you are already doing AI implementations, we will assume that you already have a data architecture in place. But if you do not have one, it's best to have it so that you ensure that all the systems that you are building are also AI ready. You do not want to get shocks at a later point in time where you do an AI implementation and you see that your data architecture is not in place. Another one is to have a data contracts in place. So with whom is your data being shared? With internal parties, with external parties? Where is it being shared? For how long is it shared? Right? And what a sort of security is implemented. So all the documentation related to the data and the parties who are involved in this thing can be tracked in the form of a data contract. Again, if you are using different tools, the data contracts are actually inbuilt in many tools. So we strongly suggest you do that. Metadata management is a very important activity. If you're already doing AI, your AI systems would want to read your metadata to provide you relevant results. So managing your metadata will be important. And so does having a lineage or a traceability built into systems. And again, as I said, the undeterministic nature will result in users getting some result and authorities asking you how did the AI system or how did your organization come to that result. So traceability and lineage will be a very important activity when you are implementing governance. And then finally, your data quality plays a major role because some of the metrics that I'm going to talk about, for example, biases and then and responsible AI related metrics, they require you to have good quality of data. Otherwise, you can very quickly fall into some of these traps where things might just get wide open with respect to regulations. Now, say you have a framework in place, you would want to look at what are the ways that you would implement this, like what sort of governance models can be implemented. Centralized governance model is something that is implemented by many organizations, larger organizations. Although while it gives a response, while the responsibility is usually held up at the top, it causes a lot of inflexibility in terms of the teams actually not being are always tied down to the rules and guidelines that are provided at the top, and so there's less flexibility. A decentralized one is something where a lot of modern organizations try to do this, startups and others. While there is agility, there is again every team works in silos, so you really end up with no one really being responsible for the governance within the organization. And so what we suggest is having a more hybrid approach. It's so like a federated one. The responsibility is central, but there is still agility at the edge, and every team is flexible to work, but still work with the regulations that are provided by the organization. So we suggest a federated governance model. Again, this governance model is not just specific to data, but even for AI governance models, this is something we suggest. Coming next, we'll cover the responsibility and the performance metrics. Responsible AI has four key things that we want to look at. Right, one is fairness, about how the people within the who are using these systems are treated. Right, so it could be external customers or internal users. We want to ensure that there are no discrimination, there are no biases that are built into this. And what we need to also understand is that if you have a lot of data, um, internal, even internal one, it could also have some bias in it already. So you want to ensure that you are vetting this data through various tools to ensure that there's no inherent bias that it already has. And bias can also come from different models. So you want to ensure that those checks are also done. Next is with respect to transparency. You want to give detailing of, for example, if you are having a loan-based system and where there is AI is taking a decision, then whenever there is a request, whenever you want to go back and check that how did AI really come up to this decision, you should be able to trace back. So that level of transparency has to be built in, that where did the data move, how was the decision really taken, right? So, and that should be also human readable format. We need to understand it should not really be code, but it should be some sort of steps where an auditor or regulator should be able to read and then say that this is how the decision was taken. Next is to obviously have a safe and secure system. This is given. And then human values will play a big role. So the first priority is given to human values, then to any other activity. Right? So now, apart from the responsible AI part, there are also these performance metrics that are important to ensure that whenever, say, for example, if there is an audit that happens, or even if there's a regulatory body that is coming and asking you, a good way to start will be to provide organization relevant metrics so that there is confidence already established, right? And so one we talked about, like, for example, the explainability part, like if the loan has got rejected, why did it get rejected? So all the detailing is there. Next will be on the performance metrics itself, that the how is the decision being taken and what is the metric that is actually being considered, right? So, and this would vary based on the modality of your AI model. For example, you could use a text-based model, or you could be using imagery-based models, and also you would also be doing comparison. For example, if you look at the decision making itself, if this same request was going to a human, how would the human actually respond, right? So providing those metrics will be also important to ensure that the AI models are behaving, are not really taking autonomous decisions based on their free will, but it is a properly human aligned system. Then the explainability part, again, as I said, explainability has to be in the user readable format. So within your organization, or even for the regulators or the compliance experts, they would come up with their own lens of how they will assess these results. So what that will then mean is that your tools or other systems that are being used should be able to provide the information in a readable format. So in this case, if you're looking at how the business stakeholder is reading this, it's the model reduces default risk by 20% and approves 50%. Accountability itself can be at various stages. So if you take an example of, say, a loan approval model, then even before the data is provided to the model, there can be some constraints that can be set up. So, for example, you could say that higher credit score is equal to low risk. So that constraint can be set up. There can always also be feature related analysis that can be done where you say that which of the features or columns, say for example, are important among the entire within the entire data set. In the intrinsic stage, uh, the model itself is providing the explainability. So, for example, it could say that the loan was rejected because because the income was less than a certain number, right? And in the post hoc, the explainability is coming after the model has processed the data, and uh, this could be something like, for example, there could be counterfactual explanations that can be provided, where it could say that okay, your loan was denied, and if your say salary or income was 5,000 more, your it would have got approved, right? Or it can also be that there can be details provided on which features actually contributed towards the rejection of loan. So such details can be captured at various levels. For example, if this one of the models, so this is a result of one of the model execution, right? And you could see some of the metrics like how fluently they reply, right? And you're also looking at some of the risk metrics. For example, was there any violent content that was delivered either as an input or as an output, right? Similarly, was any hateful information shared, right? So what we have to also understand here is it is not just about how uh, AI tools are responding, but also how humans are interacting with these AI tools. So you want to capture both of them because ultimately this conversation is going to be used for your training as well, internal training or for your RAG based systems. So you want to really track the entire interaction. In terms of traceability, as I said, so for example, we are looking at one such traceability where the data has moved from various sources and into various report, and then you can actually trace back. So for example, if there is a report and it has shown a certain outcome, then you will be able to trace back to from where did it origin, what sort of actions or manipulations were done on the data, right? All of that can be tracked. Similarly, you have your AI conversations that are going on, and you should be able to trace back the AI conversations as well, how humans have interacted, what tools got triggered internally, right? And what were the scores for at each level as well. So should be able to make some traceability into your AI tools. Again, this is from one of the tools, but today almost all the systems already have some tools in place. So you should be able to use traceability as well. Yeah. So Poonam, I think I've just covered all the important aspects of what is required. So we focus today on the various compliances that are there, and within that, what are the important things that have to be covered, the majority of them, and how different tools can be used. I think we are good for now. Yeah.
Thank you, Kalyan. That was a very good coverage of the core concepts when it comes to governance and compliance. So, in case any of you wants to have a detailed discussion and get more deep dive information, do scan the QR code on the screen and someone from Accurate will reach out to you to schedule a session soon. With that, we come to the conclusion of this session. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful day.